Hi, everybody. So it's almost 7 o'clock. Andrea is going to be late today, I think, so I'll be chairing this. I just give people a minute here.
Automatically join computer audio when joining. Check box.
Whoever's doing that, please mute yourself. Thank you. Let's see who we have here. Got Julia, 2, Tariq is 3.
That's all I see is 3.
I only see 3.
Nope, 4. Becky Grossman.
Okay. Becky's hiding.
Let me know when you want to begin and I'll hit record.
Okay, let's give it 2 more minutes.
Okay.
Slide in here under the tag.
Sorry, I'm just getting the last little bits of dinner on the table for the family, but I'm here.
God, it must be nice to have dinner before 7 o'clock.
This is late.
Fish and chips tonight.
I know. I always say that. Actually, unless you have school-age children or younger, eating dinner before 7 is actually uncivilized, which I've always found to be a real challenge. Since we have about 80, I think I counted last year. I think I had 86 nights where I had a meeting. And so
I don't think I'd want to count up.
You probably do more. I've said to people, I spend 86 nights. I think there are people that spend more than I do. I know they do. I said I think table stakes is like 75 to 80 nights. I don't think you can get away with anything less than that. So I don't see any of my colleagues shaking their heads on that one. So I know they agree. How we doing, Daniel? We pick anybody else up?
No, just the 4 of you. Oh, wait, hold on. Council Oliver's joining. Council Lipoff's joining.
Okie dokie. All right.
So that would be that will be 6.
That's good enough to go going. Who we missing still? We're missing Councilor Downs and
Bowman.
I'm here.
And we know you're here.
Okay.
You created a wake. All right. You can go ahead and start the recording, Danielle.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Recording in progress.
Good evening. This is the scheduled meeting of Public Safety and Transportation for Wednesday, September 20th, 2023. I'm going to introduce the committee members and a few other dignitaries who are here. From Ward 1, we have Councilor Oliver. From Ward 2, we have Councilor Lucas. From Ward 3, we have Councilor Maliki. From Ward 4, we have me, Chris Markowitz, I'm the vice chair. From Ward 5, Andrea is not here yet. From Ward 6, we have, help me out, who am I missing on 6? The other missing person.
Bowman.
Alicia Bowman, Councilor Bowman, she's not here. I suppose she will be. From Ward 7, we have Councilor Lipoff, and Councilor Grossman from Ward 7, and from Ward 8, we have Councilor Lipoff. I'm doing that from memory, so it's not too bad for an old guy. We have 2 items tonight. They are both appeals of decisions that were taken in Traffic Council. The way we're going to do this is I'm going to read the item into the record, and then Mr. Kozes, who is our Director of Transportation, and also the chair of the Traffic Council, will give an overview presentation of what happened, the presentation itself, and then how the discussion and vote went. At that time, we'll take any clarifying questions from the committee members, and after that, we will then go to the appellant to state their case, and then we'll take any public comment after that, and then we'll bring it back in the committee to vote it. So without further ado, the first item is 271-23. It is the appeal of Traffic Council decision TC 30-23. And Councilor Maliki, on behalf of Matthew Chow, I hope I pronounced that correctly, 95 Columbia Ave, appealing the approval of Traffic Council petition TC 30-23 on July 13th, 2023 for changes to the parking regulations on Columbia Avenue in order to install bicycle accommodations. Do we get any other Ward 8 councilors joining us here, Danielle? I don't think
No,
so.
no.
I also see from the planning department, director of transportation, Josh Ostroff. Did I miss any? And Jenny Fairley, who is our ADA officer. Did I miss any other city people?
Isaac Prezant,
Isaac,
transportation engineer.
transportation engineer. And we have some other folks here who are quite active in biking and so forth. But let's go ahead and take it away, Mr. Kozes.
Okay, good evening. I'm going to try and share my screen, okay? Okay. And everyone can see that, right? I assume so. So I'm going to,
Yes.
okay. So both of the presentations, almost all the slides are taken directly from the Traffic Council meeting from back in July 13th. I'm just going to quickly go through the presentation from that meeting and maybe a slide or two about what happened after the meeting. So this is the Columbia Avenue item, right? Yes. Okay. So we're starting just with a location map. This shows a straight shot for bicyclers directly from Needham Street to the Countryside School using Columbia Avenue to Heatherland to Andrew Street. But for this item, we're just focusing on the very first 3 blocks. That's Columbia Avenue. The Columbia Avenue portion of this overall accommodation was what was voted on at Traffic Council and subsequently appealed. So here's a view of Columbia Avenue, the first block. It's looking from Needham Street. The first block is a 2-way street. Then the second block, it becomes 1-way. Not advancing. Okay. So here's the second block where it becomes a 1-way westbound and a do not enter for all vehicles, which includes bicycles. Here's the concept plan that was developed for Columbia Avenue. We're going to talk about sort of 3 sections. This first block from Needham Street to Kenneth Street, and then the second block from Kenneth Street to High Street, and then the third block from High Street to Winchester Street. All right, so the first block, it's a 2-way street, this block of Columbia. All that's being proposed is not to put in bike lanes, but to put in painted Sharrow markings on the street to remove parking right here. And then the second block, this is where it becomes 1-way. So it's 1-way from Winchester Street to Kenneth Street. So the recommendation and what was voted on for this block was to paint a Sharrow on the north side and keep parking on the north side, so no change to the parking. Then on the south side, to paint a bike lane and there's already no parking on the south side of this block. And then the bike lane would continue onto this third block. So we would be removing parking on this short block right here. The north side, no change except to paint a Sharrow on the north side, and also adding a stop sign at the very end. So this would be a stop sign for bicycles coming down Columbia Avenue, stop at the stop sign, and then continue on to Heatherland.
Mr. Kozes, can I just
Yes.
pause you for a second? Can you show us where the appellant's house is on this map?
Well, I believe that it's either this house or this house. It's on the north side
On
of
the north
Columbia
side.
Avenue.
Okay, thank you.
So where parking would still remain. So it would still be a 1-way street westbound. Parking would still remain on the north side. These Sharrows, these bicycle arrows would be painted in the street. Maybe that's the only change on the north side. Okay. So the next 2 slides are really just technical language of what Traffic Council voted on in our traffic and parking regulations to be able to create this concept plan, right? So These are just the technical changes, removing parking, for instance, on the south side of that second block, the third block of Columbia Avenue. So at the meeting on July 13th, the presentation was made. We heard from the public, and Traffic Council voted unanimously 5-0 to move ahead with these changes to create the bicycle accommodation. We thought it would be very helpful, especially on Needham Street. We're creating bike lanes as part of the reconstruction of Needham Street. It's just a really easy connection between Needham Street and the Countryside School. Wouldn't force bicyclists to go all the way up Needham Street and then down through Dedham Street, or to travel illegally, through the do not enter sign on Columbia. So it was approved 5-0. I just also wanted to point out that there was one short block of Heatherland Road that was also discussed at that Traffic Council meeting on July 13th. So as part of that particular item, Traffic Council also voted to remove parking on one side to add the bike lanes. That item was not appealed, but we also didn't move forward on just that one block. It's on hold for now, just sort of pending what happens with the Columbia Avenue item. I think that's the last slide. So I could either leave, would you prefer that I leave the concept plan up or stop sharing?
Why don't you leave the concept plan up for a second, just in case, because what I'd like to do before I go to the appellant, excuse me, my English is failing me today. I'd like to just see if there's anyone on the committee have a question about this in terms of just background. It is actually, even though it's a small run, I think it's 1,000 feet altogether or something like that. It's still, there's a lot of stuff going on here. So, and switch over. So if anybody has a clarifying question now. Julia?
Yeah, I just wanted to, where you were waving around where Mr. Chow's house was, I'm not sure it was the right area. It's the second house in from Winchester Street on the north side. So it's actually that house there, the one where you can see the whole square roof. It's that one. The other lot there's two buildings on a longer lot, is the one on the Winchester Street corner. So it's the one, it looked like you were waving around where it said Mount with no right turn, which is just part of that parking lot with trees on it, I guess. But yeah, that's the right house. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, does anyone else on the committee have a question? I'm going to go ahead and ask just one of these days, the appellant to speak here. I also forgot to mention that our clerk is Danielle Delaney. I'm sorry about that. She's one of our finest clerks and appreciate her service here. Mr. Chow, would you like to speak, or you're on mute? You're on mute. I see your mouth moving, but I don't hear any sound.
Fix it. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you fine.
I guess you
Thank
can. Okay.
Okay.
Can you turn that down a second? Okay, my name is Matthew Chow. I live at 95 Columbia Avenue. I am totally blind and use a guide dog.
I would just say, Mr. Chow,
And,
for a second. If you have a second
first, I would like to
device,
thank Julia for filing the appeal on my behalf and thereby meeting her obligations as a city councilor, even though she does not represent my ward. Second, I want to make one thing perfectly clear. I'm not opposed to bike lanes per se, but rather the apparent unregulated development and promotion of same with little or no regard given to pedestrian safety. I have been struck by a bike and lost 2 teeth as a result. Also, I've had close calls with other bikes and I've been hit by cars twice. I am not a timid traveler and I am cautious. 3, why make an otherwise quiet residential street busier and more dangerous by openly publicizing, AKA Sharrows, and marking this lane as part of the bike network. 4, I have serious safety concerns for the following reasons. 1, narrowing of street by marking off bike lane may force traffic further over to my side of the street, putting sorry, I'm reading this, but my dog and myself at risk while she is either relieving herself or while we are crossing the street. 2, Columbia Ave goes downhill at my house, further presenting a risk to my seeing eye dog and myself, as most bike riders tend to maximize their speed in these areas. I should know. I used to ride a tandem. 3, silent killers. By their nature, bikes are silent, potentially, quote, silent killers, unquote, because by the time I hear them, it's too late. And that applies to other folks who are blind or visually impaired who either use dogs or canes as mobility aids. Also, if I get taken out by a bike or car going the wrong way down Columbia Ave, you not only take me out, but my seeing eye dog as well. 5, given the above, if approved as per the last meeting, I have concerns for my personal safety. If bike lane development goes ahead without more attention given to both bike and pedestrian safety, it is not a question of if a bike pedestrian encounter occurs, but when. Unfortunately, I speak from experience. And some people may say that such accidents of this type are rare. However, it is not rare if it happens to you. That's all I have to say regarding this issue.
One way that becomes 2 ways.
What?
One way that becomes 2 ways.
Oh, what about the one way? Well, the other thing is that the one way that becomes 2 ways, it's equally a problem. I mean, it's, you know, and it's been, this whole thing about bikes being silent has been highlighted by the fact that, you know, when I walk down Winchester Street or anywhere else, I often don't hear bikes until they're right on my hip. The other thing is to be concerned about here is the possible proliferation of e-bikes, which go a lot faster than your regular 5, 10, 15 speed bike. And those guys are going at like 25 to 40. So, you know, I speak from experience here. And in actual fact, in terms of Columbia Ave, even though it's legally one way at my end of the street, I've observed a lot of cars going the wrong way down the south side of Columbia towards Winchester. Oh yeah, by the way, city vehicles are not immune from this.
Are you all set, Mr. Chow?
What? Turn up. So
it's very helpful to only have one device on audio, otherwise you're going to get that feedback. Are you all set, or do you have more to say?
No, yes, sir, I'm all set.
Okay. All right, I'm going to open it up for public comment. Does anyone from the committee have a clarifying question before we do that? Are you all set? Okay, let's go ahead with Mr. Corey, and then Ms. Martin, you're next. So go ahead, Jesse.
Hi, my name is Jesse Corey. I'm actually right now driving, but I'm going to speak anyway. And what I have to say is that I really support the appeal because Mr. Chow is blind. And I do not want cars driving too close to his house. What I would think should happen is that something like a bump out should be created in front of Mr. Chow's house to prevent cars from going too close to his house, so that he can take his guide dog into the street if it's needed. In terms of the bike lane going the wrong way, I would support it even with a bump out if Columbia Ave was not a hill, but since it's going downhill way close to Winchester Street, I think that the appeal should be approved and traffic council's decision should not be upheld.
Are you all set, Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Martin, you're next. And then after that, we will have Mr. Ostroff. Go ahead.
Thank you. Jen Martin, 86 Allen Ave, and I serve as the chair of the Newton Safe Routes to School Task Force. The Newton Public Schools wellness policy encourages students to walk, bike, carpool, or ride the bus or van to school. The Newton Safe Routes to School Task Force, which includes parent volunteers and city and school staff, as well as elected officials, work together to create safe, convenient, and comfortable walking, rolling, and biking routes to school. This is one of those routes. It is a quiet, half-mile, low-stress, direct connection that connects Needham Street to Countryside. There really isn't a safe alternative. The other option for walking is to go on Dedham. That isn't a safe bike route for elementary school students. I'd first been alerted about this route by parents back when we crowdsourced bike routes to school at the beginning of COVID in 2020. But because students would need to ride on the sidewalk for that one-way section, we chose not to share it out amongst our list of bike routes to school. Riding on sidewalks is legal outside of business districts, but I certainly prefer to see cyclists riding on the street. Since then, I've heard from families at the Avalon, now called the Avon, that they wish there was a bike route to Countryside and also a safe route to our 3 Southside secondary schools that wasn't Dedham Street. The changes create a legal, safer on-street bike route that will help organize movements of pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers throughout this corridor. The Newton Safe Routes to School Task Force is happy to work with Countryside, the principal, the PTO, the PE teachers to help educate families about this route in particular and bike etiquette in general. Newton Police this year are providing bike safety education and training, including etiquette, to all elementary school students in Newton in either 4th or 5th grade. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Next, we have Mr. Ostroff, please.
Thank you, Counselor and members of the committee. Josh Ostroff, I'm the Director of Transportation Planning in the Planning and Development Department since January of this year. I would urge the committee to uphold the Traffic Council's decision. I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Kozis, and Captain Doucette for their thoughtful attention to this in July and since. With that said, I completely understand the concerns of the appellant, and it is my job to assure or to try to improve safer conditions for people traveling on all modes, particularly vulnerable road users, including people walking, people cycling, people with disabilities. And many households have, many people that meet 2 or more of those descriptions. We're currently working on a network plan for cycling and walking throughout the city. Just this week met with the Commission on Disability to give them a preview and get their input. I have no doubt that the appellant feels that he is at risk, and I'm very sympathetic to that. And I think that the city needs to do a better job in a few areas. One is just assuring safe routes, and so I applaud what's happening on to get kids to Countryside and to all of our schools. The other is to make sure that our sidewalks are smoother, are intact, that we've got appropriate, curb ramps and tactile warning strips for people with impaired vision. But the education and enforcement are also critical parts of this. As Ms. Martin said, we need to do more about bike safety education. That will be cited in the plan when it comes out later this year. And we need to have better, visual cues for drivers. I'm very concerned about the reports of cars traveling the wrong way. That's a risk to everybody. And that certainly requires an enforcement response, and I'm glad that that's been escalated. And I hope that the appropriate measures that are taken. So when, you know, I hope that the committee votes to deny the appeal, but that is by no means the end of the matter. And I'm available for any questions, to meet with the appellant or anyone else directly and try to strategize solutions to assure the safety of everybody that travels our roads in Newton by any mode whatsoever. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight and glad to answer any questions at any point during the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ostroff. And I'm glad you said that. I want to make sure that you are available to answer any questions and also to follow up with Mr. Chow, regardless of how we decide this tonight, because I think there are obviously legitimate concerns there.
I would be honored to do so.
I believe next we have, I don't know if it was Ms. Hanser or Mr. Prezant, but I'm going to go ahead and recognize Ms. Hanser first, and then we'll go to Mr. Prezant. So take it away, please. I think you're on mute, Jane.
Okay, I'm good now, right?
You're good.
The situation around Traffic Council TC 30-23 can accommodate both the needs of the children who live in the Avalon and in the near future Northland, and who want to bike safely to and from Countryside School, and accommodate the needs of Mr. Chow, who is totally blind and would like to be assured of his own safety. And we have to honor his feelings and his fears. I laid out a statement that is in the official record, which is why I feel that the bike lane and the counterflow bike lane from Needham Street to Andrew as a whole, the two docket items as a whole, will successfully modify motor vehicle behavior and minimize the type of illegal driver behavior that many have observed, and I have observed it in going down several times to look and see what Mr. Chow is concerned about. And I do agree with Mr. Chow that city vehicles, DPW vehicles, are not immune from this behavior. And this is a problem that really needs to be addressed. That said, I spent a little bit of time reading why Mr. Chow is concerned about stepping into the street, in particular to clean up after his guide dog. I spent a little time learning about how guide dogs are trained. And I also read Nathan Phillips' statement where he was, which is also in the official record, where he proposes a possibility of planters at both ends of Columbia Avenue to minimize any illegal driver behavior. The guide dog is clearly professionally trained. His daily habits, his patterns, and predictability are a necessary part of his training. And so reading what Nathan Phillips wrote, I thought perhaps we could even take a parking space where this dog is trained to relieve herself and put some planters on both sides of that, give a comfortable space so that Mr. Chow would not be going out into the street, or cars would not be coming into that space. And it's sort of similar to what Jesse Corey suggested, but Jesse was suggesting bump outs, and this is something that could be more flexible and could be moved this way or that way. It's also a little bit easier for the city to implement. So I just simply want to conclude that I believe that working together, we can accommodate both groups. It's not one or the other, and we have a lot of abilities to accommodate Mr. Chow's needs and address his fears and accommodate the needs of the children. And I would like to say that today, just even today, DPW lowered, made the sign that was, I think they did it yesterday, the day before. There was a sign, blind person area, that was on one of the utility poles. And just today they lowered that, so it's more easily visible to drivers.
Okay, you all set, Ms. Hanser?
Yes, thank you.
And I just like to point out, I just want to make, I think everybody understands this, but just to be sure, where you're sort of suggesting this accommodation, which would involve planters, that it does not impede the bike lane. It's on the other side of the street, right? Hello? I don't know if you've muted yourself again. I've got all these other windows open here. I think that's what she said. I think it's not on the south side where the bike lanes is. Just want to be clear about that, because we don't want to put any, if we're going to do this, we don't want to put things then back in the bike line and force people.
No, it's not. It's not.
Okay, fine. All right. We're going to go ahead with Mr. Prezant, who is also one of our senior traffic engineer, I guess now. Please, Mr. Prezant, go ahead.
Hey everyone. Thanks. Definitely good to have this meeting again. I thought maybe it'd be good to just take a step back, go through a little bit more of the discussion that we had at the traffic council meeting, and sort of why we're here. So there was a site meeting sometime a few months ago. I think it was towards the end of the spring, because school was still in session. It was myself, Adrian, and DPW, a couple counselors, and Jen Martin. So we walked to this area. We essentially walked from the school, sort of back entranceway, off of Andrew Street or Road. Forgive me, can't recall how it ends. And we walked it all the way to Needham Street. You know, we observed a lot of students biking it. It wasn't something I was particularly aware of, but you know, I was really pleased to see it. You know, they were biking in both directions. So I just wanted to emphasize that this is something that's happening now. And, you know, the point of that meeting was to come together and just see, you know, what can be done to make it a little bit more formal, make it legal, right? You know, bikes, you know, should be following motor vehicle laws, and we have these one-way sections. So that, you know, that was really why this all came together. As far as contraflow bike lanes, you know, that really comes down to recognizing that these are one-way streets, and you know, we have guidance from NACTO, that's the National Association of National Association of Transportation City Officials, and we also have MassDOT bikeway guidance, and both speak very strongly on striping contraflow lanes where we're legalizing bicycles to head in the opposite direction of an otherwise one-way roadway. So that's where the design really came from. And you know, from DPW's standpoint, you know, if we have an existing action that's taking place and we want to formalize it, I think the bike lane really just helps organize folks. You know, I understand the concerns with wrong way driving, pinching down, folks, you know, in conflict with each other. And I just think having markings and better signage just helps organize bikers better. So I don't see it as something that's going to be a major conflict point, but you know, I totally respect the opinions that we've heard so far. So I just sort of wanted to explain, you know, how we got here, especially from DPW's perspective. You know, we did talk about the wrong way driving a bit more in response to the observations. You know, there's definitely an opportunity here to update signage and pavement markings to help deter that wrong way driving behavior. We haven't done that yet. We just wanted to respect this overall process with traffic council and sort of have one big effort out in the field, depending on how the decision's made tonight. But regardless, you know, that's something that we can absolutely look at, and we're ready to do so. So yep, just wanted to point that out, and I'm here for any more questions. And thank you for the good discussion so far.
Thank you, Mr. Prezant. Okay, after this, we have Mr. Phillips, and I believe he is the last person with his hand raised. So if you'd like to say something, you know, public testimony here, please do raise your hand. Take it away, Mr. Phillips.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Markowitz and committee. And my name is Nathan Phillips. I live in Auburndale on Charles Street. And I would like to speak as a parent of two alumni who attempted to bike safely to school through Williams, Brown, and South, and just having the experience of being, you know, a little bit scared of whether my kids were going to make it to school safely on bike. I want to also speak as a member of the steering committee of Bike Newton. Although I'm not speaking for that organization, I'm just speaking for myself. But I want to say that we have striven over the years as we've grown to be more about mobility for everyone who has at any level of ability, and that people can have choices about their mobility. And so with that, and that includes children going to school, having the legal, safe route to get to their school. And with that, I want to also just say that I think that Mr. Chow's concerns are legitimate, and that I would I really appreciated Mr. Ostroff's statement that the city should go out of its way to do everything it can to make accommodations to make it safe for both children on bikes as well as Mr. Chow with his guide dog. And I really thought the suggestion by Jane Hanser was excellent in that regard. If there can be something done to make it safe for everyone, then that would be great. And then the last thing I just want to say is that I've been hit by a car. I was doored and flew and hit pavement. This was a few years ago. So I share that common ground also with Mr. Chow. And I feel that the root problem here is the wrong way, the illegal behavior of the cars. And that should be the first thing that's addressed. And if we can address that, then it can be safe for the other modes, and making a safe accommodation for Mr. Chow as well. So I urge the withholding or the original decision to be upheld. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Now we have Ms. Jenny Fairley. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Vice Chair Markowitz and the entire committee. I appreciate the chance to speak here. I'm speaking in my capacity as an ADA coordinator for the city, but more specifically as a full-time pedestrian, as Mr. Chow is. We are both visually impaired. He is totally blind. I have a little usable vision, but not so good. And I use a guide dog, just like Mr. Chow. And my dog was trained just like Mr. Chow's dog was trained and is trained and continues to be that way, to relieve themselves in the street, on pavement, not on sidewalks, but on hard pavement, whether it's asphalt or concrete. Just for a picture, the dog usually circles us on leash, not on a very long leash, but on leash, because and we don't go walking down the street for the dog to relieve like everyone else does. The dog cannot relieve himself or herself. I think we both have girl dogs now, because in harness. So we can only use, a guide dog is guiding us when the dog is in harness. So for relieving, and which is at least 4 times a day, if not more, we go out and the dog circles us. So he's not too far away when he stops and she stops, and we also touch the dog to figure on the top of his back, in order to say, okay, is this pee or is this poop? I'm sorry to be a little graphic, but you need to see what goes on. So this dog, Mr. Chow, myself, I don't use my driveway as much as he does, but he does it all the time. And he stands at the end of the driveway, so he's not peeing on the driveway or the sidewalk or anywhere. And the dog is circling into the street. Not too far, but it's not like it's an option. It's absolutely not an option. I just want you to know that. I want you to see the picture of what I go through and what Mr. Chow goes through to safely relieve our dogs. Yes, I think the ideas from Jane and Jesse and Nathan are excellent if nothing else can be done. But I just want to point out that the distance we're talking isn't 1,000 feet. It's 390, I believe, or maybe even less of that stretch of that block, the third block that Mr. Kosas talked about, of sidewalk and one way, the wrong way, I guess, if you want to say it that way, for bikes that are going from Needham to Winchester. It might take a child or an adult a minute to 2 minutes, maybe 2 minutes, to get off the bike and walk that 300 feet. It's not that far. I think actually that's safer, because I don't think enforcement, you're not going to have a police cruiser sitting there stopping cars from, you know, going the wrong way on the one-way section. So I think that's the safest way. I know everyone doesn't agree with me. I'm not against bike lanes, even though maybe people think I am. I'm not. But I can also quote some guidelines from the Federal Highway Administration that says when there are shared use paths, shared streets, you must have considerations for people who are visually impaired / blind. So this is not a precedent. This is our city taken into account that this resident has needs that may contradict the contraflow bike lane. In fact, informally, as Isaac said, it's all happening, and they've never come close to Mr. Chow. They could very well come close to Mr. Chow now, the cars and the bikes, because the idea is to put a contraflow bike lane, paint on the ground, and possibly moving cars, I would think for sure moving cars, over to the north side of the street. So I'm really concerned. I think that this one doesn't have to be painted. Also, how is it legal that it's a one-way street just by a sign? And maybe in the TPR somewhere, I don't know. Why can't we put a sign that just says, no one way, no cars allowed, past this point, bikes allowed, informally, or not, just have the children, they certainly still can have this route, and they will, and it's a very quiet residential street. Why not get on the sidewalk, get off their bikes and on the sidewalk, or just go ahead and, if it was a busy street, I'd have a completely different answer here, but it's not, but it's going to become busier. So thank you very much. I hope you will approve this appeal and not upheld the decision of the Traffic Council in this situation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Fairley. Really some really good testimony this evening. Mr. Prezant, let me just check and see if I'm missing anybody else here. Go ahead, Isaac.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of Jeannie's point, really what Traffic Council voted in was removing parking and having that exception in the TPR when it comes to one-way roads, except bikes, not unlike what we did on Hagen Road, not unlike what we did on the carriageway. So the striping is really, that's not something that we're approving, but obviously it's a critical piece of this discussion. So we want to have that discussion. We can have that conversation about a compromise on, where we do and don't have striping and what type of striping that is. But I think at least it might be good to note it doesn't sound like anyone's opposed to restricting parking, which is something we voted in. And then it doesn't seem like folks are opposed to the concept of bicycles traveling in the direction against, otherwise one-way vehicles. So it's almost like we're having two discussions at the same time. So we may want to separate that and again, like, there may be a compromise here with the striping.
So, Mr. Prezant?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead, and I don't see anybody else from the public, so I'm going to go ahead and open it into the committee, but we'll leave this open in case there's a couple other questions. Counselor, and I should say we've been joined by Counselor Bowman since the start. I saw Counselor Lipoff first, so go ahead.
Okay, Isaac really led into what I was thinking about. This really is two tasks here. I think that I'm hearing that a lot of people want to keep what Traffic Council passed in concept, but a second piece here is how to support Mr. Chow. And the things that I came in here thinking about was a sign that I hear is already there. But there are other things we can do. As Isaac said, that they can look at the striping. We definitely have to get the police out there if people are going down a one-way street the wrong way. There has to be a bunch of things that we can do to support Mr. Chow without destroying a bike route to school. So I'm all in favor for doing this in a two-step process. And those are my thoughts. And before I sign off from this, I just wanted to be a little selfish here for a second and tell Margot Volterra that I have been following her artwork and it's spectacular. Miss Volterra, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lipoff. Okay, I believe Councilor Lucas is, Councilor Maliki, I'm sorry. Councilor Maliki is next. Then we'll have Councilor Lucas, Councilor Grossman, and Councilor Bowman. Thank you. Take it away, Julia.
Okay, thanks. Let's see. Try to be organized here. I did satisfy myself that as long as kids' bikes have brakes and working brakes, that the slope, there's enough flattening out area near the bottom that I don't think they're going to be running out into the street. That was one thing I was concerned about. So I actually got on my folding bike and tried it, and I think kids can handle it. And I heard from one parent particularly who had a very good system for making sure his kids could handle any particular route or condition before he let them go to school on their own. And I'm sure all parents do something like that. I really appreciated Jane Hanser's comments about her research on guide dogs, and I wasn't sure if I was saying the wrong term by calling them seeing eye dogs at one point, but I heard Mr. Chow use both interchangeably, so I'm glad one did not sort of become politically incorrect. I was feeling like there was a lot of kind of dismissing of his concerns by sighted people who'd never been through guide dog training. And, I didn't understand myself, why can't the dog just go over there instead of over here, until I learned about how the training starts from puppyhood and it's done a certain way. So I was trying to think of ways that, because I frankly don't expect the appeal to be upheld. So I was trying to think myself of what ways we can do to make things safer, so that Mr. Chow can do what he has to do and his dog can do what she has to do without any danger. Rather than us telling, people who've never had the experience saying, this is going to be better for you, I would like to make him feel that it's actually better. So I was thinking flex posts, and then Jesse Corey suggested bump outs, which sounds even better, or the planter idea, or reserving a space that would be there. I do think there, as Jeannie Fairley said, there is an alternative to striping the bike lane. And it's a little mind bending that the traffic council decision is just about the parking and not the striping. But it seems like the striping would be a natural consequence of the traffic council decision being upheld. I actually walked the whole distance from Kenneth Street to Winchester Street without being in a particular rush. It took me 1 minute and 23 seconds. And I don't think that's too long to expect kids to get off the bike and walk for 2 blocks. So that is an option. And as somebody mentioned, it might even be safer. I completely think the idea of the route itself is great. It's, the straight shot, that's wonderful. But I really would like to make, I guess, a reasonable, I think to me, dropping the striping, until we can do something like a bump out that ensures Mr. Chow's safety and his dog's safety, I think a reasonable accommodation would be to, just make that a walk, two short blocks of walking rather than insisting that kids stay on their bike for that stretch. So I think that's about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Maliki. Next, we have Councilor Lucas. After that, we have Councilor Grossman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank Mr. Chow and Councilor Maliki for filing this appeal. This is an interesting project. I do have some questions about the project. And the first question I have is, as Councilor Maliki alluded to, bikes traveling eastbound on Columbia Ave in the direction towards Winchester, it slopes downhill into a very speedy Winchester Street. Looking at the plans on our screen right now, I do not see a stop sign in that area, and I was just wondering, is there going to be one? If Mr. Prezan or Mr. Kosis can answer that question.
Yes, so at the Winchester Street approach, we would have a stop sign, a smaller size, similar to what we have at Hagen Road or the carriageway.
Okay, thanks. The other question I have is, and forgive me, I obviously don't know the answer to this question. It was never stated. Approximately how many students bike to Countryside School right now that will take this route?
DPW has not done a count. Just having observed it that one day that initiated the discussion, I thought it was at least a dozen. And sort of the general idea is being mindful of the fact that we anticipate more, especially with the future Northland development.
Yeah. Okay. All right. This is interesting. Okay. Well, I think a lot of people have said this, and I am going to vote to deny the appeal, but I do want the city to work with Mr. Chow on any other safety measures that they can do to help him out, whether it's a bump out, additional signage, whatever, to protect him from cars and bikes when he is out in front of his house. I think all efforts must be made to that. And that's all I have for right now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Lucas. Councilor Grossman and then Councilor Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, I also want to thank Mr. Chow and Councilor Maliki for filing this appeal, and to the members of Traffic Council who clearly had a really thoughtful discussion around it. To everybody who spoke tonight, I found this one of the most compelling conversations we've had about a traffic council issue before this committee in all the years that I've been serving on it. And I really appreciate everybody's contributions. I thought they were all, they all had merit and made me think. So thank you. I wanted to just ask the folks from the city side of things. We heard a lot of what sounded to me like really good ideas to help to meet Mr. Chow's needs and concerns. And I was wondering if you could comment on what, if any, of those ideas you think are feasible and we could incorporate. And then one question I have for you, Mr. Chair, is do we have the option to condition our decision on any of those particular changes or accommodations?
That's actually a great question. I was thinking the same thing, because obviously, I completely agree with what you said. I think the testimony tonight has been incredibly helpful and as rich as anything I've heard in the 6 years that I've been here with you on this committee. I don't know how to do that exactly. I don't know if Clerk Delaney can help us. We don't have anybody from law on tonight, do we? I don't think so. But I feel like we don't, if assuming this, if this does get denied, it still clearly has follow-up action, I think, to address some of the suggestions, everything from signage to the planter to, what we do with the striping. There were a number of good ideas put forward here, and I don't want to lose those. So I may ask Mr. Ostroff, Mr. Prezant to see, if they can at least at a minimum take these. We do this is a recorded session, so and Clerk Delaney is taking notes, but that we don't lose what is being said here, and that we actually can action it into some kind of follow-up. But I don't know that we have anything, similar to a condition, to our conditions in a council order, like we have in land use or something. I just don't know the answer to that. It seems to me it's a straight. You're a lawyer, so it seems to me straight up that what we're being asked to do here is really just up or down on the appeal relative to the parking. And we can look at the language again and incorporating that language, but that's the extent of what we're really charged to do here. But I think we do.
Right. Well, the lawyer and me. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say the lawyer in me says we should do what we want and make our argument as to why it's appropriate, and then let the consequences be as they may, as other people interpret what we do.
You're a beg for forgiveness person.
Excuse me. Well, it depends on the situation, but in this particular case,
there's a lot to be said. Chair, but Clerk Delaney, do you have any idea on this one? Have you seen this before?
No, I haven't. I think you could make a motion and then make suggestions for DPW.
Okay, but how?
I don't know if anyone from DPW who's present is in a position to, promise is not exactly the word I'm looking for, but strongly signal or, kind of pledge to work on one of these particular solutions and sort of make a commitment of sorts to Mr. Chow. I just sort of taking the appeal as a whole, it makes total sense to me to follow traffic council's recommendations in the sense of removing the parking and the various legal actions that they put forth. And it makes sense to me, particularly given what Mr. Prezant shared with us, to make provisions to have a more formal bike lane here. But I also think that some of those other suggestions seem really logical and feasible. I just don't know which one is best, and I was hoping that perhaps
why don't we do
Mr. Prezant or others could tell us.
Yeah, failing our ability to say write this into the record tonight. I just see that Chair Downs has joined us. Welcome.
Thank you.
Maybe when we're done with the testimony and the voting, maybe we can take it to do, you and I as chair and coach and vice chair of this, along with Mr. Prezant and Mr. Ostroff, to reconvene, follow up, and make sure that the suggestions, we can record the suggestions, are disposed. Okay, what do you think? I'm seeing a head nod. So we'll take that on, and that way, I guarantee you, with Chair Downs, we won't lose this. So we'll make sure that we get it done, and the rest of the committee is certainly welcome to help. But we'll take that as a to-do. We'll copy the committee. Whoever's speaking, could you please mute in the background?
That'll be me.
No, I think it's you. All right. So let's do that at a minimum, Councilor Grossman. So because I think we all feel that regardless of what we do here, there is follow-on activity for Mr. Chow, and that his concerns and as supported by Ms. Fairley are valid, and they do need to be addressed. Having said that, let's go ahead with I think Councilor Bowman's next.
Thank you very much. I'll start just again by thanking Mr. Chow and Ms. Fairley for sharing the process of how they work with their guide dogs and what their needs are. I think that's really critical, and I can understand Mr. Chow's concerns. I'm actually more concerned to hear that there are cars going the wrong way, because of course, two cars going the wrong way, much more dangerous situation for all involved. I have some thoughts, and Isaac, I hope we have a commitment at the very minimum. This is low cost to look at the placement and of the one-way sign at the bottom of High Street. It's to the left. It's very centered in Kenny Street, and it's skewed to the left. I think there seems to still be a driveway opening there. So if there's an opportunity to move it to the right, I just think it's somebody, if they're bombing down, it's a hard street to bomb down, but if they're coming from like energy gymnastics and they come down, they might not even realize that they're going the wrong way. It's just sort of set off. They might just misinterpret that. And I definitely feel like if the people coming the wrong way, where the do not enter signs are, there's only one on the right. So could we just there's a pole right there, throw up a second one on the left? I always think with do not enter, it's good to have it on both sides. I'm fine with it not being painted. I mean, my dream for roads like this is really to neck down the major, the entrance at Winchester and Needham Street as a longer term, and just make it a street that you really don't want to go on unless you live there, and that makes everybody safer. I will also point out, I was refreshing myself. I know that I have biked both directions on this street. I clearly, as a cyclist, sometimes, I think one-way streets the wrong way sometimes make a very, especially if it's a low volume street, I feel more comfortable on that. This makes a good connection, not just for students going to Countryside, but it makes a good biking connection for adults connecting from the Countryside neighborhood over to Needham Street and beyond, because it gives you the opportunity to not be on Dedham that is curvy, and there's a little bit of a hill there, and people are moving very fast. And the intersection where Dedham and Walnut come together is quite a complicated thing to do on a bike. So as a cyclist, if I were trying to get over from the Countryside neighborhood over to Needham Street, this would be my route of choice. And getting off a bike and walking it's not convenient. Sometimes it's not an option. You're on a cargo bike with a child behind. You really don't want to get off and try to pull them along. That's not always the best solutions. I'd prefer us to have solutions that keep bicyclists safe and keep them on their bike and sort of moving along. So, anything we can do to stop the two-way traffic illegally would be a great first step. And I certainly would support anything else that DPW and planning felt was necessary to and possible, I think, to make Mr. Chow's situation feel a little better. I will join others to say, I'm not in support of this appeal. Clearly, I think that making our streets and our city more possible for people to bike safely is critical to meeting our health goals, our transportation goals, our climate goals, and I just think that but we can do it in a way that's respectful for all road users. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Councilor Oliver, and then I don't know if Councilor Dens, did you want to speak, or do you want to take the stick? But let's.
I'm going to let you finish this one out.
Finish this one out, okay.
And then I'll take the next one.
Okay. All right, Councilor Oliver, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief. I'm just curious, how wide is Columbia at? Is there a difference, more to the point? Is there a difference in the width of the street at Needham versus Winchester? I can't tell from the map, but it's unclear. And I'm curious. Do we know that?
Yes, that first segment between Needham and Kenneth was just a bit narrower. That we're not really proposing a big change there. We're just proposing to restrict parking. It's still two-way. There's no space for a bike lane there. It's just about, making drivers aware that bicycles do at times share the roadway as they're legally obliged to. And then the section that we're more focused on of Columbia, that's 23 feet. So the plan was to have a 6-foot contraflow bike lane. That's a pretty standard bike lane width. You know, technically it could go down all the way to 4 feet. But you know, we need to be mindful about sort of how it's interpreted by vehicles as well. Like we don't want it too wide where it looks like a vehicular lane.
Yes. Sorry, I'm trying to ascertain whether or not it's wider at one end of the, if one end of the street is wider than the other. Doesn't matter where the bike lane goes to answer. Just, are they the same width?
Right. Yeah, I would say it's a little bit wider once you get past Kenneth. So between Kenneth and Winchester.
Kenneth and Winchester is wider as opposed to the other end at Needham.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm pointing at the where the map was. Okay, so we basically have, were this to be a two-way street end to end between Winchester and Needham, we have room to make it 2 lanes. Okay, that's what I was after. I completely agree with where Councillor Lucas was speaking a few minutes ago. I am in support of finding a solution for our resident. I believe that given the fact that there is enough room for 2 lanes of traffic, vehicular traffic, at both ends of the street, I think we can easily accommodate protection for our resident as well as bicyclists here. Whether or not, you know, how we treat that bike lane, I will leave to the experts. But again, this was a very compelling conversation. Thank you so much. I learned a lot.
Okay,
And
thank
by
you.
the way, I should probably wrap that up by saying I would not support this appeal, just to wrap that up.
Right. Okay, everybody whose hands up now has spoken previously. Councilor Downs, did you want to speak? I saw your hand up before.
And words were taken out of my mouth. I don't need to speak again.
Okay, Councilor Maliki, your hand is still up.
Yeah, I just, one thing I forgot to mention, which could be done now, regardless of what happens and independent of this, there is the sign that says blind person area is actually on a telephone pole at the west end of Mr. Chow's property. So by the time you're reaching the sign, you've actually passed his property. I think it would be, that's fine to leave it there, but I think it would be better, more useful to have a sign before you get to his property. At the moment, right now, there's what appears to be a temporary work area ahead sign on not the kind of round permanent metal type pole, but the sort of like the garden fence supporting type pole. And you could just put a sign on there in addition to the work area ahead and have a blind person area before, ahead of where a driver coming from that direction would reach his house. So I just, that's a suggestion for Mr. Prezant and others. But I really think something, you know, if this goes through, which it seems it's going to, have something like ideally the bump out with a planter on it to make it really visible so cars don't run into the bump out, that would make things secure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Maliki. I'm going to go to Mr. Kozas next.
Okay, good. Thank you. I had to stop the screen share so that I could raise my hand. I think that that's a flaw in Zoom and happened one time before, I remember. But I just wanted to summarize the follow-up actions because, you know, what's being voted on tonight are just very specific things, right? Officially making it a one-way road except for bicycles, removing some parking, and adding a stop sign for bikes. These are just specific changes in the TPR. But I'm hearing a request to, you know, to meet and have some follow-up discussion. If we, you know, meet and decide that, you know, maybe we want to put in a bump out or a planter, you know, maybe we would need another traffic council item to remove additional parking. It depends. If we just want to change the striping, maybe we don't need to have a bike lane striped along a certain portion. That's a DPW decision in terms of just how to paint it. If we're talking about just adding a second sign or, you know, or changing the location of a sign, that's something that could be done tomorrow. There's nothing that needs to be voted on. We could, just make that a note. We wanted to wait and have this meeting first. So I guess that's it. Thank you.
Okay, well, it sounds like I think it would be a good idea as we vote this to do a quick revamp, but as I said, yeah, and certainly you'll be part of the discussion, but Councilor Downs and I will take organizing the folks, including anybody on the committee who wants to help, just to make sure we get all this stuff down. Again, I think we've got the recording and we have the notes that Clerk Delaney's taking. So it comes into categories, as you said, though. We've got signage. We've got some possible modifications to the road itself in the terms of putting something in there. And then we've got this question around striping. So 3 different things.
And Chair, if I may, there is a working group of DPW school officials and planners and elected officials, which I think you should come to, and that's the appropriate forum, because they already exist. They already have looked at this kind of thing over and over and over again. And so we can bring the suggestions into that, come up with some working suggestions.
Yeah, we've got
and we should invite Jeannie as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, the talent and the brain power is available to us. So we just have to organize it and then do it. Let's see now. Who else we got here? Okay, so Mr. Corey, you had your hand up before. Did you want to speak again?
Oh, new people.
I know that I already spoke, but I want to something that I think that makes sense to say is that is that due to the concern about people driving the wrong way down the one-way section, that might actually be related to the fact that Columbia Avenue starts out as 2 ways at Needham Street and then all of a sudden becomes 1 way going towards you. And some people might not be prepared for that and suddenly and unknowingly drive the wrong way.
Right. We have a lot of that. Unfortunately, we have more than a few of these in the city. So it's, as you probably know. Are you all set?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead with Ms. Voltaric. She hasn't spoken yet, and then we'll go to Ms. Hanser and then to Mr. Ostroff. Go ahead, Ms. Voltaric, please.
I wanted to thank Mr. Lipoff. That was very sweet of him. I'm drawing every day. The other thing is, would you explain more what a bump out is?
Who wants to, Isaac, you want to take that for the technical explanation?
Sure.
It's hardscape.
Right. In the traditional sense, I would say a bump out is a constructed, some sort of physical alteration in the roadway where it comes into the roadway farther than the existing sidewalk. There are such things as flex post bump outs and painted bump outs that aren't quite to the same extent. So it could range a little bit, but in the traditional sense, yes, it's
flex post.
It's some sort of physical bump into the roadway.
Okay, I don't think it's going to work.
Flex.
Yeah, and I just want to note, I mean, from my perspective, we definitely want to have that discussion to understand what could work better for Mr. Chow. We'll definitely come together on that. A physical bump out. I don't know that DPW would be prepared to commit to that. That has drainage implications, that has funding implications for construction. So I would say that's more of a long-term discussion, but let's at least understand, what would be beneficial. And then, there are low-cost options, like signage and paint, of course. So we'll just hope to understand it all better when the time comes.
You all set, Ms. Volterra? Ms. Volterra, I think you're all set. If you're not, you can always raise your hand again. Ms. Hanser and then Mr. Ostroff.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Just a quick comment in response to Councilor Malaki's comment about the blind person area sign that I agree that needs to be moved to where the work ahead sign currently is. And I don't know why the work ahead sign isn't past that because the work doesn't start until the next block. So, it could be moved even sooner. Could be moved as far as I'm concerned. So I definitely thank you for bringing it up at this meeting. So I did want to just address the question of paint. Yes, no, based on my experience with the carriage road, because I think one of the single most important, we have some paint and we have signs and the paint, which is getting drivers to slow down, even though the paint is only at the intersections. And Isaac, you would know, 15 or 20 feet on either side. It's really that paint that gets a driver into a certain lane and narrows that road and gets them to slow down. And even once they're past the intersection, they're still going slowly. Whether that's because Waze or whatever it is tells them that this is a slower road, we are not seeing the volume of cars anywhere near the volume of cars we used to. So I definitely support paint, and I think it would need to go from Needham Street to what is it on the other end, from the east to the west or the north to the south, and just treat that whole area as a zone that any drivers coming into that zone have to be aware that there are people biking here. Whether you make a decision that you don't need it in the middle of the block, but I certainly think at the ends of every single intersection, there has to be some paint on the ground. And, Mr. Kozis would know that I've had a problem with, I've been contacting him for years, like, oh, we have contractors parking on the berm, and that's not legal. And that is now ended for the most part, now that we've gotten that striping in there. So thank you.
All set. Thank you. We've got Mr. Ostroff and then Ms. Fairley. Take it away, Mr. Ostroff.
Thank you so much. And you have been very patient calling on people multiple times. I wanted just to add that as we, I want to think of things more systemically. This is obviously a very important case to Mr. Chow and to the folks who've worked on this proposal, but I'm interested to learn whether there are similar conflicts or potential perceived conflicts elsewhere in the city. As we develop the network plan, we can think of more citywide recommendations. There's a body of research on, accessibility and streetscapes and so forth. And so we want to try to make sure that as we consider this one case, that we are doing something more comprehensive. And that's, my commitment to you all is to make sure that the plan identifies that. Not to say we'll be proposing or implementing these projects. It's an $80,000 contract. It's not going to buy any concrete or granite, but it is going to give us a roadmap, guidelines for how to move forward. And I feel like with the expertise of Mr. Kozis and Prezant and others in city government, we'll be able to set some good priorities. But I do look forward to getting together with people afterwards and seeing what might work best.
Great. Thank you for that. Ms. Fairley, you're next. And then after that, I think you're the last speaker. We're going to go ahead, bring it back in, close the hearing, and state what we're voting on and vote. So go ahead, Ms. Fairley.
Thanks very much for a second round here for me and others. I really appreciate all the thoughtful comments and suggestions. I would like, as Mr. Kosa said, to think of it as, and you also, that there's at least three things: maybe not paint the ground for the contraflow, but to do it legally by a sign. The other, I just want to caution that planters and flex posts are come out during the winter for plowing because they're in the street. Bump out, not usually, unless the plow takes it out. But so we need to, just keep that in mind. I am from the law department. No, I don't have a JD after my name. However, I do work with many departments for reasonable accommodations. And thank you, Councilor Downs, because I would like to still be connected to this project just to see what will work. And possibly just not painting the lane would not force the cars closer to Mr. Chow's property. We're talking a 23-foot, and I've been in enough traffic council meetings, 23-foot, we usually take parking away from one side anyway, because the 2 lanes after that can barely take a fire truck, etc. So often my street right out here, it's about 23 feet, I believe, and it has no parking on one side and 2 lanes of traffic. I know this is one way, thank goodness, but 2 lanes of traffic barely make it, although just about. But 6 foot of a painted lane would be only leaving 17, and there is parking on the side of Mr. Chow's side of the street. So that's a very minimum 10 foot travel lane. So we all have to be thoughtful about all that and the seasonal aspect of perhaps protecting that area where, in front of or to the just further past his house where he is with his dog. So thank you very much for considering all of that, and I appreciate it very much.
A lot of follow on to this. I see Mr. Halley has come skidding in here under the tag. So go ahead, Michael.
I appreciate that, and I apologize for too long of a dinner with some great kids talking about their day. So I apologize for that, and thank you. I was able to hear some of the very thoughtful comments that everyone had, and you do have my letter from TAG. As I'm not going to go through repeat that, but I do want to mention with this issue of paint, I know has come up, but we've seen time and time again that when both in Newton and in other locations, that when paint has restricted lanes, the real major concern of motor vehicle behavior and speeds has often been improved. And so I think for the numerous reasons that we put in the TAG letter, we think that that is likely the way to go, but that isn't the thing before you. Making the change really is, but again, deliberate, thoughtful actions based on circumstances and data and experience that we have, I think will produce a better result, I believe, for everyone once we get past this. So thank you for your deliberations and thoughtful conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Halley. Okay, that's it. We're gonna go. Do we need to close the public hearing, Clerk Delaney? Councilor Downs, you have something to say?
Oh, I was going to wait for Ms. Delaney, but I don't think we do close the public
Yeah, I
hearing.
don't think we have to do that. Okay.
On an appeal, we just decided it's time to take it into committee.
Okay.
I just was going to say you've run a great meeting so far, what I've been able to be in. Thank you very much for taking over in a pinch.
Pleasure.
And I'm glad we had such a robust discussion. I will move denial.
Okay, thank you. So we're gonna vote on this. Well, Ms. Delaney, can you please put up the language, or Mr. Kozas, whoever has that, just so the committee can see what they're actually voting on here as far as the TPR goes. So this is a little unusual in that this, oftentimes we vote on something, that's it, it's done. But this one is, we're going to vote on the actual TPR, the language, and the specifics in that. But we do have a significant amount of follow-up, which a number of people on this call will likely be party to. So the commitment is to get together, Chair Downs and I will get together and we'll help organize that and connect to the appropriate people to take care of Mr. Chow's, and not just to Mr. Ostrov's point, not just singularly necessarily dealing with Mr. Chow's issues, which of course we do want to issue, but also take a broader perspective here, because certainly this type of condition, is not going to be unique, and we're going to face other situations like this. So I guess that's just the preamble to the vote. So what we're voting on tonight is basically to uphold the traffic council decision, which removes the what it is, removing the one-way street making it a one-way street, removing the parking, and allowing, I don't know, doesn't per se allow the bike. Actually, can you help me out, Mr. Kozis? I just make sure did I miss anything here?
So we would be removing the existing language that Columbia Avenue is a one-way street, inserting in its place that it's still a one-way street except for non-motorized vehicles. We would be adding the stop sign at the end of the one-way only for the bicycles. So a little smaller version of a stop sign. And and we would be making some small changes to the parking regulations.
Okay, and so Clerk Delaney, a vote is Councilor Downs moved denial. So an affirmative vote is to deny the appeal. I guess with that you can call the roll.
Okay. Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Counselor Markowitz,
Aye.
Counselor Bowman,
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff,
Aye.
Counselor Lucas,
Aye.
Counselor Oliver,
Aye.
Counselor Grossman,
Aye.
and 6, 7.
Councilor
Hold on.
Maliki,
And Counselor Maliki.
I'm going to abstain just so that the record reflects that there was some issues to be resolved, but
Okay.
I don't literally object to removing the parking. Thank you.
Okay, so the vote is denied. Uphold the traffic council's decision 701, Counselor Maliki abstaining.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, I'm going to hand the wheel back to Chair Downs.
Thank you, Vice Chair Markowitz. Very, very helpful. And thank you for your good work. Our next item, and welcome everybody. Sorry I was late. I was scrolling down to see the end of my agenda, so now I'm scrolling back up again. Very, very long agenda once you figure in all the other things. So our next one is a parking appeal for Farwell Street, Ilya Zhavanov, and I'm sorry if I mangled your name. 131 Farwell Street, appealing the approval of Traffic Council Petition TC 35-23 on July 13th of this year for prohibiting parking at all times along the following areas of Farwell Street. South and west side from a point 170 feet west of Farwell Circle to North Street, southerly intersection in Ward 3. Mr. Kozis, are you taking the lead on this?
Yes, thank you very much. I'll just go through the slides from the Traffic Council presentation back in July with 1 or 2 additional slides at the end. So this is Farwell Street. Here is a map. This is North Street right here, and Farwell Street comes off of North Street in this way to the north and then takes a sharp turn back to North Street again. I have a couple of photos that I took that also shows the dimensions of the street. This is at the sort of the beginning of Farwell Street. I'll go back. Oh, I guess I can't go back. Okay, yeah, so this is a view from the beginning of Farwell Street down at this part near Joseph Road, looking southbound toward North Street. It's only 20 feet wide at this point. Parking is currently allowed on both sides. Then a little bit further north, this is the view looking back south again toward Joseph Road and North Street. Gets a little bit wider at this point, about 22 feet, but still parking is allowed on both sides. Now, if you turn around and look the other way to the north, this is the view. And then if you go around the curve and look back toward Farwell Circle, which is this road back here, and then the curve going back down to North Street, this would be the view. And it's about 22 feet wide at this point, with still parking allowed on both sides. So the background is that this red line right here is the only place on Farwell Street where parking is currently prohibited. We received a email. We don't know who it was from. It was a request to restrict parking on a portion of Farwell Street. So we took a look at it. We did get a video showing that the school bus unable to get through, or at least having difficulty getting through. So again, parking is currently not restricted on either side, even around the curve or at the beginning of the street. So our recommendation is to, because of the width of the street and the buses, to restrict parking on one side of the street, beginning at the curve, where we are recommending to begin the no parking anytime, posting that sign on this utility pole. So no parking from this point, you know, at the fire hydrant, around the curve, and continuing. So we have the current no parking zone already in place. We're recommending to extend that. So this is, you can see the cursor, this is where that utility pole was. We would extend the no parking zone around the curve to where it's currently already restricted, and then continue the restriction down to North Street. That was the recommendation that was made. And here's the language that we voted on at Traffic Council to make that restriction official. It was appealed, of course. So it was a 5-0 vote to prohibit parking on the south and west sides of Farwell Street back in July. After the appeal, I did speak to Regina Moody, our transportation director. She confirmed that the bus does pick up and drop off sort of right on the corner on North Street, just before Farwell Street, takes that turn onto Farwell Street and just basically needs to turn around. So it travels on that first block of Farwell Street, takes the right onto Joseph Road, the right onto Albemarle. She hasn't heard any complaints from any of the drivers about parking on that stretch of Farwell Street, but she does support restricting parking on one side. That's what Traffic Council voted back in July. She said to me that there's really no need to restrict parking on both sides if that was the reason for the appeal. As long as parking is restricted on one side, the buses would be able to get through. We could also look at this later on if it does become a problem in the future. I did go and try, and I sort of waited for a while at this location to see the bus go through. Here's a little video. You have cars parked on both sides of this first block that's coming from North Street, traveling through that first block and then making the right-hand turn onto Joseph Road. You can see that the bus is able to get through even with you have one car on one side, one car on the other side, but we wouldn't want to have cars on both sides, which is why we voted to restrict the parking on, you know, just on the one side. And that is it. Thank you.
You're muted.
Sorry about that. So Mr. Jovanov, are you here? Do you want to speak to this?
Yes, I'm here. So I was the first to report that the bus was unable to go through. I had a video from my Ring camera because I live right across from that intersection. And I've seen previously vans and trucks sometimes park in that location, which with a car that's the size of the car there, it's a bit easier to get around. When you have a van or a truck in that location, things get a bit more tricky. I've seen it multiple times. I guess it doesn't happen often enough, and people were close enough to move their vehicle, so it would delay the school bus, not necessarily prevent it from going in the situations that I've observed. So I just reported that as something, as an observation. And as shown in that video, the problem is really the even side of the Farwell Street. So if we provide parking on the odd side, all the cars previously parked on the outside, allowing the bus to go through, now are going to be on the even side where the children are gathering to get on the bus. And the bus tends to go closer into the Farwell Street because otherwise it blocks the North Street that has a lot more traffic going through it. So I've talked to the neighbors since this was voted in, and anyone who opened their doors said that they don't want to see this implemented because it's like Farwell Street existed for a very long time without this. There's a high number of driveways on the odd street of Farwell, so it's very difficult to legally park on that side of the street to begin with. And we have neighbors who live on the corner of Farwell and North Street who park off the street, so only like part of their wheel touches the street. So if this is implemented, they would have to park their car either in Joseph Street or somewhere completely far away because they just can't park on the North Street because it's a busy street and there's no room for parking. So from that perspective, I know that also people were concerned if we prevent parking on that side of the street. So if we have some cars parked there, the cars coming from like Waltham side of the Farwell Street have a long stretch to speed without anything to really stop them. When there's cars parked on the odd side of the Farwell Street, they have to go around those cars and they have to slow down to check if there's something incoming. If there's no cars parked on the side of the street at all, they can just speed through to the intersection, which we've seen happen when there's nobody parked. So based on the fact that I've gathered those 10 signatures in a day or two from anyone who didn't think I'm trying to sell them solar panels, but I've literally haven't had a neighbor who supported the decision to provide the parking restrictions on that side of the street, especially because a lot of neighbors have children and sometimes nannies temporarily park there while the parents pull out, leave their houses. So it would make life a lot more difficult for a lot more people, where I don't feel like the problem exists really on the outside of the Farwell Street. In fact, it even helps slow people down as they approach the intersection where children gather to get on the bus.
Thank you very much. Are you done? All right.
Yeah.
Mr. Kozis or Mr. Prezant, did we just put the remove parking on the wrong side of the street? Do you want to respond to that? And then I'll take public comment.
Traffic Council voted to put in restrictions on one side of the street because it's a narrow street. We were concerned about emergency vehicles getting through. We, chose the west side of the street because there was already a parking restriction on the west side of the street. We just extended that restriction northerly and southerly, right? And to just continue to allow parking on the opposite side of the street as it is now.
I think you're muted, Councilor Downs.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We have so much background noise here. I keep muting myself and then forgetting. Does anyone else from the public want to weigh in? Raise your hand or just unmute and talk if you can't figure out how to do that.
Councilor Downs.
Yes.
Mike Halley, I would just say as one background piece of information, not to necessarily say which side of the street where this restriction should be, but as someone in West Newton, this is an excellent low-stress bike route. If you cut through Cavalry Cemetery from Cherry Street to High Street in Waltham, and then from there use Farwell, connecting all the way over to Nevada Street across Albemarle, and it is really quite excellent. And potentially, I've suggested it as a future bike ped route for safety, and I think finding ways to make sure that that is, that vehicles are not just essentially a single lane with double parking. I think the restriction does make sense, which I think goes to the original petition to Traffic Council, where how that should be, again, I think is slightly more in the weeds. And I think, as you might have been getting at, maybe that is the real question to do. But I would agree with, I believe, the original petitioner and with Regina Moody and Mr. Kosis that this change is useful if we can implement it in a way that's effective. Thanks.
Thank you. I also have a hand up from Sharon. Can you identify yourself and your address for us briefly?
Yes. My name is Sharon Hughes, and I live at 50 Joseph Road, and that's on the corner of Farwell and Joseph. And I agree with Ilya that I don't think there's anyone in this neighborhood that thinks this is a particularly good idea. I've lived here for more than 40 years, and I have not seen a public safety vehicle have a problem coming down the street, fire engines or ambulances. As Ilya mentioned, there are people who live on the corner of Farwell and North Street. They park on Farwell Street. There isn't a sidewalk there per se, so there's no curb. So they're able to park off street pretty much. They park very close to the entrance to their property, and they're not in the way of traffic. So it seems like restricting parking, I'm not sure what problem we're really trying to solve here. And in reference to the comment just now about bicycles using Farwell Street, I don't think I've ever seen a bicycle except a couple of kids who ride their bikes to school. There are a ton of bikes that are over on Albemarle because they're headed to the pathway, the Greenway, but I don't see them on Farwell Street. Even if they came down from Waltham and went onto Farwell Street, the easiest way for them to get to the bike path is to then cut through Anthony Circle, and they're at the footbridge to go over to the bike path. So, like I said, I've lived here for 40 years. I don't see a lot of bikes, and I haven't seen a problem with parking the way it is currently on Farwell Street. I think it's just going to inconvenience a lot of people and not fix anything.
Right. Thank you very much for your thoughts on this. Anyone else from the public? All right. I'm going to take this into committee. Committee members, your thoughts or questions? All right, please. Councilor Bowman, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. All right. I'm a little confused, so maybe I'm not the only one. Who brought the original item to Traffic Council? I feel like I should have watched the Traffic Council.
That is the appellant.
Okay. And then, so please explain. So we're unhappy about which side of the street the parking got placed on? Is that the concern, or it's just I'm not understanding I'm not understanding why the appeal is before us. Maybe Mr. Kosis could answer for me.
Yes, could I answer that?
Please.
So this all began with an anonymous video that was sent to the Transportation Division staff. We don't know who it was from. It showed a school bus stuck and not able to get through the street. That's why we went to take a look at the street, and we noticed that it was a narrow street and that parking was allowed on both sides. And, we measured it to be 20 feet at some points, 22 feet. it's not wide enough to allow parking on both sides. Our number one concern is for the safety of the residents on the street. We don't want the one time that you have, one car parked on the east side, another car parked on the west side, to not be able to have a fire truck get down the street. This is all across the city. It's the same sort of situation when we see a street that's less than 24 feet wide or less than 23 feet wide or even 22 feet wide. In this case, it's 20 feet wide. We restrict parking on one side of the street for safety's sake. So it was originally docketed, I think, by me after we received the video from a resident of the street.
Okay, so now I understand. So one thing I don't know, maybe it came up in traffic council, but I know this from my own neighborhood we needed to restrict parking on one side because a school bus with kids in it may not back up. So we cannot have school buses getting stuck. So if that's what the video showed, it doesn't matter whether it's once. Police have to respond when a school bus has children on it and it needs to go in reverse. That's the state law. So if it's that narrow that the school bus got stuck, then it seems to me that and this is consistent with other policies. I think it's seemingly the only question here is whether or not which side of the street the parking is on. If we're talking about a street that's that narrow, that's what we must do. And it's, I mean, in the case of our street, the police stopped wanting to respond because the bus kept getting stuck. But what were they? They had to go down the street to drop the kids off on the street. It's, I think that it's important, but clearly it's one thing to ask kids to sit on the bus for 30 minutes while the police respond. It's another thing that, if an ambulance or fire engine was unable to get through, to deal with a life and death situation, I think it's much more important. So unless somebody can convince me otherwise, just, please help me understand, are we in the traffic council process? Did you have a lot of participation from neighbors so that there was a lot of discussion about whether it should be the east side or the west side, right? Those are the two sides. Or the decision was made because one side is the side with the most number of parking spaces, which frequently is it's a question for you, Mr. Kosis. Sorry.
So from what I remember from that meeting, we did not have a lot of participation from residents on the street, although everybody on the entire street was notified. We didn't have any, maybe, I don't remember that we had any, or maybe one, maybe no written letters to traffic council. And I think at the meeting, it was a little confusing to me, honestly, but it seemed like the resident might have been asking to restrict parking on both sides of that first block, but we felt that it was not necessary. We felt that we wanted to restrict parking on one side and just extend it from where it was already restricted. The simplest thing.
Okay. So I'm not going to opine on which side of the street the parking should be on, but I am fully supportive of there only being parking on one side of the street. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Maliki.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I watched the original meeting live and have watched this segment 2 or 3 times since. Can somebody, I guess Mr. Kosis, tell me the stretch that was already no parking on the west side, what was the reason for that? Why that particular stretch?
That was probably way before my time. I know it abuts some apartments right there.
But it doesn't
But
about.
it seems like
it's
been restricted for quite a long time, as far as I know.
Yeah, but
But
it was
just
like
that one little section in the middle of the street.
right, but it was sort of in the middle of the block. It wasn't near any of the turning areas, and it was not encompassing the whole apartment stretch. So it just seemed kind of random to me. I just wondered if anyone knew that.
Right, and so that's the first thing that I observed is it's only restricted in the middle. I thought to myself, why in the world is it not restricted around the bend, right? So then I thought, oh, we should definitely restrict it on the inside, of that 90-degree turn. and then just extend it also to the south.
Yeah, and I guess this is for Ilya. I was getting the impression that he was the person, the anonymous person who sent in the original observation with the video. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, so it seems like you triggered a restriction that you do not yourself now support. Are you wishing you never sent that email? Yeah, and then I think this came up in the original meeting, the fact that there was nobody there from the neighborhood except I know Sharon Hughes was there, and was Ilya, were you at that, the original? Yeah, but I think it was the two of you, and that was it. And I think Mr. Kozes, he said that in the cases of apartments, not every resident gets notified. But you said something like 30 notices were sent out. So did that include some, but not very many apartments?
Everybody was notified that abutted the street. So if there's additional apartments that don't actually abut the street, I don't think that they were notified.
So kind of the people in the buildings that fronted on Farwell. Okay.
Yes.
And there's still not a lot of attendance. Okay. I mean, my impression here is that none of the people who've commented seem to want it. It seems like one of those streets where people sort of self-regulate. Yeah, sure, you wouldn't want people parking on both sides at the same time, but it almost seems like kind of a first come, first serve situation where you'll park where somebody else isn't already on the other side.
Yep.
And it has the benefit of slowing traffic under the current conditions.
But that said, at least that first block, like where the school bus comes down, there we have consensus that at least we want to ensure.
So that's the only place the bus has to come down.
Can I say something about that?
Please do.
The corner from Farwell Street to Joseph Road, if you restrict parking on Farwell Street, the cars that park there now are likely to park on Joseph Road. And that's when the school bus really has a problem. Because if you have cars parked on both sides of Joseph Road at the corner, they can't make the corner. Now, they can go straight ahead and go the long way around, but I have seen them have difficulty with making that corner. And that doesn't happen very often right now. But there are people who depend on parking on Farwell Street who are going to need someplace else to park. So I think we might just be moving, I think you might be creating a problem that doesn't really seem to exist right now.
Set. Okay. Ilya, you have your hand up.
Yes, so I wanted to mention that the likely reason that the parking was not extended down the no parking zone was not extended down the Farwell Street all the way to the North Street from that zone is because you have driveways nearly 5 feet apart in that section of the road. So it's just naturally not possible to park because you will be blocking a person's driveway, which is why I assume the zone ended where it did. And I just wanted to remind everyone, if you prevent cars from parking on the odd side of the Farwell Street, now you're pushing that entire traffic on the even side of the Farwell Street. So the cars that were previously not in the way of the school bus suddenly become in the way of the school bus. But then again, as Councillor Malaki mentioned already, it's a self-regulating street for the most part. So it's really, I feel like the solution to the problem is actually going to cause just more issues for the residents on the street.
So Ilya, I'm confused now. You made two excellent points, but they contradict each other. One is that if you that on the odd side of the street of Farwell, south of Joseph Road, there are so many driveways so close together that you can't find a parking spot there anyway. Is that right?
That's the section from the apartment building to the Joseph Road. From
Right.
Joseph Road to North Street, there are there
I'm
is
looking at
space
it
to
on
park.
I'm looking at it on Google Maps. You might be able to park one car there without it being a hazard anyway. And that's just one's, because everybody else has they're duplexes, they have two driveways. You'd be blocking someone's driveway to park on that side. And then you said, which is also a relevant point, that if we restrict parking on one side of the street, those cars will then be parked on the other side of the street. But on this particular block, we're talking, and I think we just agreed on it, one car, because you only really have space for one car to use on-street parking on that side of the street. Am I right?
I've seen multiple cars parked. If you look where the unit 131 is, there's space to park one car there, and there's
Right.
space to park another car where the red Toyota is probably parked from our neighbors, which is permanently parked there. So that's at least two cars right there.
All right, so I'm looking at it. I agree with you about 131, but as soon as you leave 131, you're within 5 feet of either an intersection or close enough, or you're within 5 feet of a driveway. I'm just looking at the map.
Just saying from what I observe every morning, and throughout the day, there's the neighbor's car is nearly always parked there. And every once in a while, we see someone park behind their car closer to our unit, to our house. And we also sometimes see cars parked between 131 and 129. So between the driveways there. So those places do get used for parking every once in a while. So that's,
Between 131 and 129 is definitely within the 5 feet of that driveway.
But
that's unneighborly, I would think. All right, good. You've answered my questions. I am now looking at Councilor Lucas, followed by Mr. Prezant. Do you have an answer for us here?
No, I just wanted to point out that maybe we ought to just look at it as two segments, right? We look at Farwell from north to Joseph. It seems like we're already saying maybe there's only a couple cars that parked there, so I don't think that's a major hardship on the rest of the street if those couple of cars move over. And then if we want to look at the rest of the section separately, that's okay.
Thank you. Let's start with Councilor Lucas and then Councilor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have procedure question. If the appeal is upheld, does this go back to Traffic Council? And can something else be accomplished for this neighborhood?
I'm pulling down my cheat sheet, which is why I paused for a moment, Councilor Lucas. We have several options. We can approve the appeal as is, which means it goes back to Traffic Council, or Mr. Kozis, can we bring it back up again in Traffic Council in a modified form?
You could send it back to Traffic Council if that's what you would like to do.
And that would be appealing, approving the appeal?
I don't know.
Okay. And then we could appeal, we could amend the appeal. I personally would rather not do Traffic Council's work tonight. So that would be my preference, would be to send it back to Traffic Council. We can remand it to Traffic Council for further review. or we could hold something for trial, and I don't think we're ready to do that work. So we have 5 different, if I'm counting right, 5 different options with this.
I'm going to suggest we remand this to traffic council. We've had far too long a conversation on this without enough detail and, and expertise of Mr. Kosis. I think that would be what I would suggest.
Yeah.
So we
I
have,
feel like we need more neighborhood input, but we also need to be very clear that when you have roads as narrow as what we're talking about here, it's only appropriate for parking to be on one side. We cannot count on the fact that people don't usually park there because it only takes 2 cars parked across from each other to keep a fire engine from coming through. So, there are roads. We're not talking about 30 or 33 foot wide roads. We're talking about roads that are too narrow to handle. And we can't count on drivers to be smart enough to think, oh, there's someone parked right there. I shouldn't park across from them. We know that doesn't work. So I would like to make a motion to remand this to traffic council.
we have a motion on the table. Committee members, are you willing to take a vote and close the discussion at this point?
Yes.
I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads. So I will call the question. We're all in favor of remanding this item to traffic council for further review. Please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So I believe that's unanimous. Do we have any nays or any abstentions? We are unanimous on that. That concludes our business tonight. This will come back at traffic council. Neighbors
Mr.
will be
Prezant.
notified. Mr. Prezant has a question. Yes, go ahead.
Just really briefly, just so we had food for thought, in the meantime until the next traffic council meeting. So just so I understand, so the request from the neighbors on this meeting is to have no restrictions on the street, just as a blanket statement, or you're still looking at that first segment differently, where you've pointed out the issue with the school bus and sent us that video. Can I just get that just as food for thought moving forward?
So the neighborhood as a whole agreed that they don't want to have any changes, and that's fine. I would rather we appeal this, and then if there's still a problem, we can address that problem separately, bring it in front of the traffic council. If there's any concerns from the drivers or there's any problems in the future with the school bus.
Okay.
But I just think that the rest of the street really shouldn't have to be impacted by this. And as Sharon mentioned as well, there's considerations of whether that traffic would go onto Joseph Road, which would again prevent the school bus from going through there, whether we can do anything as like timed, preventing parking from specific times when the pickups happen, anything along those lines. I think it's a separate conversation, really.
Okay, so we'll get some written input from the transportation coordinator from the schools department. That way it's very clear. Hey, we've spoken to the school bus driver. This is what would benefit them, and then hopefully we can all acknowledge that at the next meeting, and then consider the rest of the street separately. Sound good?
Madam Chair, can I ask a question? Just a process. If we wanted to, I think the issue here is one of the issues is the fear that restricting parking on one street might push it over to another street. Do we need to docket something to look at any adjacent streets, as we were discussing? I feel pretty strongly about making sure if we have streets that are 23 feet wide, we have to have parking only on one side of the street. It's just, I'd like us to be able to get to the whole city on this, but this is.
I think on this corner, we probably want to look around the corner and just make sure
make sure. So do we need do we need to docket something to expand the review, or this docket item in traffic council is enough to think a little more broadly?
Mr. Kosis.
Well, this item was only Farwell, but part of my review, I did look at Joseph.
You muted yourself, Mr. Kozis.
Sorry, I don't know how I did
You
that.
looked at Joseph and then you
So I
muted.
did look at Joseph Road. I did see that it was pretty narrow as well with parking on both sides. And I, you know, I think it would be safe to restrict parking on one side of Joseph Road as well, but that was never docketed. Perhaps it should be docketed.
All right, I will docket that to accompany it so that we're in good shape. Ms. Zhao, Mr. Zhao, you raised your hand. You'll need to unmute so that we can hear you though. I still can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't think he's muted. I'm not sure his microphone works.
Your microphone might not. So let's, I'm sorry you're having technical difficulties. We're about to end this meeting, but you will have another chance to speak as well as to write. You can write us at trafficcouncil@newtonma.gov and let us know what you're thinking. And we can move from there. I have to say, I rely heavily on our professionals who understand our safety challenges. And while the neighbors may want to have parking on both sides of the street, I can, at least from Google Maps, see that you only really have 2 spaces maximum, and that's if you're doing very small cars that would actually be legal on Farwell Street on the odd side. And if that's a way to move this forward, I'm happy to do so. But I really do think that on streets this narrow where you have school buses and emergency vehicles that need to get through, we really have to make that possible first and foremost. And so that's how I will be approaching this in Traffic Council, and I will be listening very carefully to our traffic professionals, our engineers, and the police who all sit on that committee. So I believe that ends our business. Do I have any other hands up? Is that Councilor Markowitz, please?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you very much. Are we all set?
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.